Everyone has a basic understanding of who the Vikings were: blonde Scandinavian people who wore cool helmets, had cool ships, and raided villages all across Europe. But what if I told you there's a lot more to it? Their story begins in the late 700s in Scandinavia, a cold but beautiful place. The people in Scandinavia were known as Norsemen. They had a deep love for exploration and the ocean. However, in the beginning they mainly just fished and farmed. However, they had dreams of exploring beyond Scandinavia, and so they did. They had heard legends and tales of lands full of prosperous kingdoms with advanced technology and mountains of money. They wanted to raid these rich kingdoms, so they began building ships, good ones. The ships were long and narrow, designed for shallow water. In 793, once their boats were ready, they sailed across the ocean, westward, until they reached an island in England. There was a monastery on the island, and of course, they raided and ransacked it. Now, the age of the Vikings had begun. When the people back in Scandinavia heard about their success in the raid, a spark was lit. Suddenly everyone wanted to build a boat and pillage Europe, and so they did. The Vikings continued attacking the English kingdoms. The English kings were scared, and the Vikings were brutal. They would murder, rape, and steal with no mercy. They were barbaric. Many kingdoms would heavily fortify their coasts with walls and guards, and they would still get raided by the Vikings. The kings and politicians were the only ones scared of them. The people were too. If you lived in a village on the coast, there would be a good chance that one morning you would wake up and some random Viking named something like Harold Eriksson would steal your life savings and then brutally chop your head off with a battle axe. Soon the Vikings weren't just raiding England, they were raiding basically all of Northern Europe, the Kingdom of Francia, the Baltic kingdoms, Scotland, Ireland, and more. But the Vikings didn't stop in Northern Europe. Why would they? Soon they moved on to the Mediterranean. They raided Iberians, Italians, and North Africans. They even had control over Constantinople at some point. If you think that's impressive, what until you find out they didn't stop there? In school, you were probably told Christopher Columbus discovered America. Your teacher lied. 500 years before Christopher Columbus, in the year 1000, a Viking named Leif Erikson sailed so far west that he reached North America, in modern-day Canada. He named it Vinland. The Viking religion wasn't Christianity or Islam, it was paganism. Unlike most religions of their time, they believed in multiple gods such as Freya, the goddess of love, and Thor, the god of thunder. No. Not that Thor. This Thor. Paganism involved lots of human and animal sacrifices, rituals, and fortune-telling. They believed that if you were a good warrior and died in battle, you would go to a place called Valhalla, which is basically just Viking heaven. They didn't have a book like the Bible where they could write down everything about paganism, so some villages and cities would develop vastly different versions of paganism than others. As you might know, nowadays, Scandinavians don't believe in paganism, they believe in Christianity. So when did this switch happen? Well, during the 900s, the peak of the Vikings, they began losing faith in paganism and switching to Christianity. This was because they were very connected with Christians. Previously, they had been isolated in Scandinavia with almost no knowledge of other religions. But when they started trading and raiding the Christians, or taking them as slaves, the Christians would tell them about their religion. So the Vikings would like some things about Christianity and slowly change some things about paganism until eventually, it was just a slightly different version of Christianity. When Vikings began switching to Christianity, they would raid less, because raiding random cities, stealing from people, and murdering innocent people is not exactly supported by Christianity. Viking kingdoms were being established, so instead of just hopping on a boat and raiding other people, the Vikings would fight against each other for land and riches. So now that the Vikings were distracted with fighting each other, the other European kingdoms that had been demolished by the Viking raids were starting to recover and even become stronger than the Vikings. The European kingdoms began reclaiming their lands and riches that were once controlled by the Vikings. Slowly but surely, in the 11th century, the Vikings were pushed back to right where they came from, Scandinavia. Nowadays, Scandinavians are Christians that are peaceful with the kingdoms they once pillaged and ridden. But they are still proud of their ancestors who managed to voyage all across Europe and dominate the continent for many centuries. If this video was interesting to you, you might want to check out the show Vikings. This is not sponsored. I genuinely think the show is amazing. Obviously, it has some elements that might not have happened in real life, but it will give you a pretty good idea of Viking culture and history. Ragnar Lothbrok was a real man who really went from a farmer to one of the greatest Viking rulers in history. If you made it to the end, you honestly deserve a reward, because only about 10% of my viewers survive until the end. Type Ragnar in the comments to signify that you've made it to the end. As always, thanks for watching, like, subscribe, and trust me, if you liked this video, you will like the other cool history and geography videos I have on my channel. I'm starting summer vacation soon, which means I will have much more time to make videos, and you can expect about 2 videos a week soon. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.